I would compare it to musical notation, just as to a helpful mentation, if you will, on Sanskrit, right? So if I say I, or I say I, they'll have very different meanings. And for us, that sounds like, well, just because you said it different doesn't mean, right? But in Sanskrit, that's important. So anyway, I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but another allusion to chanting, yes? Mm-hmm. So, the phonic alphabet of Sanskrit is taught and is made the root concept. The phonics, the sound, the variations of the characters. And he talks about it as the half letter. In other words, there's the letter, but that's only part of what it is. The letter is a representation of its base conceptual foundations, which vary. This holds good for all writing things, fortune-telling, sentences, and all elements and realities. Common mortals learn the foundation of letters. Later, they come to know what is right and what is not. So that's an interesting statement. Normally, you learn the alphabet, you learn how to speak, right? Write things down, say words, grammar, all of that. Even though the deeper stuff is covered, it's kind of glossed over to get you communicating early. But then as you mature, you start to learn the deeper meanings behind what you're saying in Sanskrit. You could argue we do the same thing in English, but it's not as profound, right? Bodhisattva Kashyapa says to Shakyamuni, "O world-honored one, what is the meaning of the letter?" It seems an odd question, because obviously the meaning varies with the letter, but maybe that's what he means. Maybe that's an effect of the translation here. I do not know. O good man, it stands on 14 phonic bases, which constitute the meanings. The so-called letter is nirvana. Wow, interesting statement. So the letter is a physical, visual manifestation of a concept, a foundational concept that has 14 phonic bases, all of which have their own sphere of influence and meaning. And he makes the analog that the so-called letter, in other words, all of the phonic bases that it represents in sound and inflection and all of that, is itself a breaking away from the standalone being of the letter L. The letter L is not about being an L, it's about representing all of these conceptual firmaments, yeah? So that's an interesting postulation using the word nirvana there. Being eternal or outside of time, it does not flow away. What does not flow away knows no end. What knows no end is the adamantine body of the Tathagata. These 14 constitute the foundation of letters. Now that could be confusing. And all I'll say about it, because I don't want to add confusion, is that these sounds with their utterance represent certain facets of being, life, karmic components, that are built into the idea of the potential of Tathagata. They're not, in other words, those sounds aren't invented here in the physical world. They have their root in the potential of life to begin with. They simply manifest. And actually, if you think about it, with all the languages in the world, those sounds, we hear them in other languages, albeit the letters being very different, the physical half, if you will, but the foundations that represent communication of certain concepts, they're just built in to the life of humans, yes? So he's identifying those needs and expressions of communicative life to be a priority of the manifestation of humanity. Okay. Now I put a little paragraph in here. And here we have a lesson on the phonics of Sanskrit. Why here and why now? One can only assume that the language barriers of a country with currently over 125 distinct national languages, to this day, had great difficulty proclaiming social order and laws, let alone complex teaching. Could you imagine? How would the oral teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha spread throughout India when it had so many varied languages? And I don't mean just dialects, completely distinct languages. It's difficult to comprehend. I mean, it would be like looking at the United States and saying that people from Arkansas would not be able to discern what somebody from Ohio was saying because their languages were so different. And yet all fell under the rubric of an English-speaking America, right? Or United States. Boggles the mind. This chapter could just as well have been named Sounds or Voice. More to the point, yes? I say this because there are several tenets of Buddhism about the voice as a vehicle to enlightenment, or enlightenment itself, right? The sound of Buddha's voice, right? But understand, when we say Buddha, we don't mean Shakyamuni. We mean the manifestation of Buddhahood. So each of our consciousnesses manifests Buddha, albeit through our own voice. Interesting. The voice of Buddha is enlightenment, is a quote that I threw in there. All right, back to the chapter. A, the letter A, is so called because it does not get destroyed. What is indestructible is the three treasures. For example, this is like the diamond. It is also so called because it does not flow away. What does not flow away is the Buddha. In the 9 holes, outlets of the body, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, 2 outlets for excretion, of the Buddha, there is nothing that flows away. So it is the unflowing, the anasasrava, the non-defilement. So the sound of A cannot be usurped to mean something that it does not. Words can, but the sound of A cannot. Interesting. And there are 9 holes, hence it is non-flowing. Non-flowing is the eternal. The eternal is the Tathagata field. The Tathagata field is not that which has been created. Remember I said created here in samsara, or not samsara, but the saha physical world, yes? Hence it is non-flowing. Also, A is virtue. Interesting to assign that sphere of influence, virtue, to the letter A. Makes you want to be more careful about how it appears, where it appears, how one uses it. And this is singularly. This is apart from how it functions within a word. Makes you think learning the language must have been supremely difficult in those days. But as I said earlier, a lot of that was skimmed over until more maturity in the individual, if they had the opportunity to continue their education, yeah? Education's really big in India, if you've not noticed. Virtue is the three treasures. For this reason, we say A. Next, A, with a line above it, stands for akarya. What does akarya mean? In worldly life, we can call him an exalted person. Why do we say exalted person? Exalted means non-attached. It means of little desire and feeling contented. Also, it is called pure. It thoroughly passes beings across the great sea of the three worlds of the cycle of birth and death. That is why we say exalted. Another allusion to nirvana, right? Also, A, with a line over it, means institution, implementation, which is to act in accordance with the pure precepts and observe comportment. So A to us would mean dignity of sorts, but a dignity built on the concept of dignity and sort of the temple or the institution of dignity, right? You keep growing this influence and meaning of a letter, and this is a letter, a long A, I guess we would say, because of the line over it, right? Also, A, with a line over it, means to depend upon an exalted person. This is to learn his comings and goings and all that he does. The three exalted ones are given offerings, respected, and paid reverence to. One finally serves one's parents and studies the Mahayana. Good men and women uphold the prohibitions, and all bodhisattvas are called exalted ones. A, with an accent to the right, tilted to the right, yes, also means order. Now that's different than dignity, but they're related, aren't they? It says, come and do this. You should not do it like that. So do things go. One who checks and surpasses non-comportment is an exalted one. That is why we say A with a line over it. So I don't know why he just jumped to A with a tilde, but I have another 2 cents to throw in here, and it says, this is an important statement that obviates the practice at home is valid. Most readers might conclude from many texts and Nichiren's writings that leaving the family is a requisite of practice. This was certainly true for centuries. However, this monastic rule for segregation from the vicissitudes of the general public no longer holds. In fact, in our era of the decline of the teachings, it is very bodhisattva exigency to be amongst the public as an exemplar. Continuing on, I, the letter I, is the Buddhist teaching. Pure action is extensive. pure and untainted. It is, for example, like the full moon. Do thus, not like that. This is right, and that is not right. This is a lecture of Shakyamuni Buddha, and this is what Mara says. Hence, we say, I. Interesting, because I would immediately correlate I with identity. I mean, that's how we use it, right? But it has a significance much greater than I, and yet, where is Buddha experienced? In the I, in the consciousness, right? Ninth consciousness is Buddhahood. So it gets very circular here. I, identity, is a samsaric illusion, right? And it's a device of identification. But the letter I, in all of that, really indicates how much of an illusion that samsaric self is and how powerful it is, because that very same I is the location of enlightenment and Buddhahood, where we discover an entirely different I. If you replace I for self, you'll know we've talked about this a lot, right? We say I. The meaning of the Buddhist teaching is wonderful and profound. It is as when we call the laws dharmas of Maheshvara and Brahma unmolested or unlimited. Well upheld Buddhist teachings, is the protection of Dharma. As I've often said, Dharma is the experience of Buddhahood or the teaching of Buddhahood. Also unmolested, unlimitedness, or unrestrictedness is called the four protections of the world. As these four are unmolested, one well takes in and protects the great Mahayana, Lotus, and Parinirvana sutras, and one unmolestedly expounds and disseminates them. Also, A with a line above it, a long A, stands for the unmolested, unhindered, or unstinting dissemination of the Dharma to beings. All right, so now I'm going to pause for a second because you may be at this point going, what is all of this? Do we really need to know this? What does it mean? Well, I don't think it's a very long chapter, yeah. But it is a moment of reckoning with taking note of how we speak to people. So I would say, don't get too admired in the actual translations here, the words used. Try to glean from this, as it's not that long. We'll go through it. Try to glean from this the implications of language, right? And more specifically, how we communicate. What is our attitude and intent when we speak to others? Are we completely free of influence and politic and self-modulations of feelings about the person we're talking to, the environment we're speaking in, the argument we had with our sibling this morning? Are we speaking our deepest truth about our personal understanding of our practice of Buddhahood? Or are we trying to fit a script? Do you see what I'm saying? We have to, it's an overused word, but we need to exercise purity in our dialogues, even to ourselves. Get it straight what you're actually saying. That's much more difficult than it would seem. And I will tell you right now that after you've practiced a year, 5 years, 10 years, you will, over time, begin to see fallacies in the language you've used in the past that you did not know you were doing. As you practice, you will expurgate, get rid of, clear up a lot of those obfuscations, things that get in the way of really communicating clearly. To communicate clearly means to be pure in what you're saying, not that you said it in a particular grammatical form. That's not clarity. Formally it is, but in Buddhism, and what we're talking about here is, are you maintaining the meaning of the Dharma as you speak? Or is it influenced by the 3,000 realms in every single thought moment? That's something to chant about, yeah? So as a function of honing our practice and self-realizing, yeah, I think this is an important chapter. Forces us to really consider at a granular level, right? The letters. Are we really hooked in to our understanding of karma, dharma, and our mission? It's built into the letters, remember? So I'll continue a little further. Where are we time? I've gone. Yeah, let's see. I'll finish with A here, and then he goes into the letter U. So I'll finish with the long A in the line, and then we'll call it for this video, okay? It's not much further. Okay, so the A with the line above it stands for the unmolested, unhindered, unstinting dissemination of Dharma to beings. It's exactly what I was just saying. Also, next, A with a line above it, is the unmolested, unconstrained. It asks and says what is right. This is nothing other than learning of the Vaipulya Sutras. So there's an onus to understanding all of the Mahayana when you speak to others or speak on Buddhist Dharma, yeah? Also, next, the A, long A, stands for the crushing out of jealousy. When the barnyard grass has been thoroughly weeded out, everything changes into what is auspicious. So we say A. Isn't that also what I was talking about? Once you remove all of the influences and biases, right, you get to what is pure, and that is what is powerful, universally. And so that's it for A. Next, we'll start with U, the letter U. We'll leave that for the next video. I hope, though, that my little keynotes on how to use this chapter are of value for you, because otherwise this is just turns into doldrums, and you know, you fall asleep. It starts all to be word salad. But there is, if you can just keep entertained by it, you can see the myriad connections with your own life, your own expression of Buddhism, how you experience it as well as how you express it to others. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be honest, direct, and pure. Other than that, whoever you're communicating with has to do the same thing you've done. They're going to have to learn it for themselves, right? Just as you did. You wouldn't take anyone else's word for it. I mean, it helps to intercommunicate, gives us different ways of thinking, but ultimately, it's all an individual practice. It's on us. So all the more important that when we communicate from that pure, true place. Not from, well, I read once, unless you're quoting Nietzsche or going to it and sharing that writing, that's valid, yeah? All right, enough blah, blah, blah. I really, really appreciate you guys, your practice, your being here, your using the full resource. And I'll remind you very quickly, the full resource is the website, this, obviously, the videos, the free podcasts, if those are handy for you. Some people love those. I like physical books. We have a bookstore. You can buy either the PDF or the EPUB or the printed version of the books that I've put together. Let's see, what else is there? Yeah, there's the mandala store, the Gohonzon store, as it's called. Anyway, lots and lots of stuff to help you in your study, in your understanding, in your dissemination. Use it to speak with others about. Have little discussions, or maybe not really debates, but sometimes they turn into debates, yeah? But debates can be good to exhort people to do their own research. And that's always a good thing. In the meantime, I really, really hope you by the way, all the links to support this effort in the description below, and the links to the stores and so on and so forth. Please take care of your health. Savor your practice. Take your time. And I will see you in the next video, and we'll continue. All right? Okay, with that, bye for now.